Well, for a little bit more on this BRICS Summit, I'm now joined via Zoom by the Chairperson of the South Africa chapter of the BRICS Business Council, Busi Mabuza. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the programme.
Thank you so much, Peter.
All right, so what would you say have been the key takeaways on day one of this summit?
Peter, it was very clear from each of the heads of state that we need each other even more for the sake of the recovery of our respective economies. There was a lot of emphasis on the opportunity to share lessons in order for us to be prepared for any similar future pandemics, but also to share immediate solutions. China has been able to arrest the spread of the pandemic in their own country, and all other countries felt that there was an opportunity to learn from each other in that regard. Of course, the emphasis on multilateral platforms, with BRICS becoming an even stronger multilateral platform, was acknowledged by each of the heads of state. So I think the meeting went very well.
All right, so COVID-19, a real big shadow. I suppose also one that kind of exposed some of the fragilities of this grouping over time. And I wonder if it's coincidence that beyond China, the country members of BRICS were among the worst hit with this pandemic. Is there anything that we could have done better as a collective, perhaps, to prepare and learn for going forward next time?
Peter, it seems the knee-jerk reaction was, of course, to lock down and thus impacting the supply chains immeasurably. So even where we needed, South Africa, for example, needed active pharmaceutical ingredients from India, we needed protective equipment from China and India. And the BRICS Business Council had to reach out to those counterparties and start making arrangements to assist each other. China, of course, is a very interesting, I think, country to learn from because of the discipline that they seem to have and the kind of single-minded focus they seem to have because of their culture. So maybe there's something to learn there in the culture as well. They had a better grounding and footing than the rest of us in terms of a very vibrant economy. So they could take the time and the opportunity to invest in cushioning the economy. As a result, China didn't get into negative growth, but the rest of the other economies are having to now work on trading out of negative GDP growth that they're facing at the moment.
All right, so as the chairperson of the South Africa chapter of the BRICS Business Council, give me a compelling case for BRICS and business, because it's been a while now that this grouping has been together. Has it borne real fruit for business?
Peter, I think if you reach out to the business people that form part of our 9 sector-based working groups, then you will find out very good stories about the opportunity that has been harnessed through the BRICS platform. Let's look at the agriculture opportunity, for example. South Africa is quite advanced in terms of the agricultural produce that we're able to put out into the global markets. Citrus, we are one of the leading exporters to the world, and the penetration into the BRICS countries has been growing steadily and in a very promising fashion. At the moment, this cooperation between India and South Africa, insofar as the pharmaceutical sector is concerned, and I expect that we will be seeing great results on that platform as well. There are opportunities, I believe, that are going to also come out of manufacturing, especially as the president reaches out to the BRICS nations to continue to invite them to invest and find opportunities, not just in our backyard, but throughout the continent. Because when we start looking for regional value chains, I think the investors are going to find opportunities that are of a compelling scale and size, and that will therefore remain even more attractive.
All right, so then COVID-19 happened, and we saw how countries mobilized to support business during this difficult time. Could there have been much more done as a grouping to help each other? Because it did seem as if each country was on its own and had to deal with its own problems.
As I indicated earlier, the knee-jerk reaction was, of course, let's protect our own, let's lock down and make sure that people are healthy and safe. However, the impact on the economies, and it was across all countries, was so harsh that we found ourselves as the BRICS Business Council having to reach out to our partner nations and say to them, please, we do need such and such a component, and please come to the party insofar as PPE is concerned. However, the opportunity also that wasn't missed, Peter, was the opportunity to start enhancing our own manufacturing and see what products and services can actually be sourced from closer by. So there is a win-win, I think, that we must take from this COVID-19 situation. Now, we can't miss out, of course, on the adaptation that all countries had to take on of digital technology. We had been talking about innovation and technology, but all of a sudden, staying at home and working from home forced us to adapt. And I believe that we shared lessons there. We reached out to each other and we have learned. And therein lies opportunities for the African continent, I believe, to further harness that opportunity for our benefit. At the moment, we're finding that our bigger partners have much more developed platforms that they want to attract us onto. And I'm not against that, but I do fervently believe that we have the skills, the enterprise to also develop our platforms. M-Pesa is a case in point, and that predates the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are probably opportunities that we need to unearth and market to the rest of the world.
So the president has called for partners in BRICS to bring more capital to South Africa, Southern Africa, and the continent, actually. What form of investment and capital flows might that be to help us kickstart this these economies of ours that have been savaged by COVID-19?
So first of all, Peter, I do agree that the commitments that have been made need to be revisited, and we need to make sure that the opportunity is still there to make sure that we follow through on those commitments that were made. However, if you look at the continent, energy remains a very attractive area of investments because of the demand and because of the need. Energy is, of course, an important enabler to economic development. I support this government's focus on infrastructure investment because, Peter, unless you iron out the logistical inefficiencies that are caused by the lack of sound infrastructure, no matter how much you invest in the production of goods and services, you won't be able, it will still be costly to get them to the destinations that you need to get them to. I'm enthused by the focus that government has paid and the other African governments on ironing out the barriers that we have put against each other, because we recognize that we'll be more attractive as a continent if we present ourselves to the world as a bloc, but also will be more attractive to each other when we're able to trade with each other much more than we're doing already.
All right,
So the opportunity is there, Peter.
So are we a genuine bloc, though, or is this just a nice gathering of friends? How does it manifest as a genuine bloc?
Peter, it will, I believe, that as we start seeing the tariff and non-tariff barriers go down, and you start seeing centers of excellence mushroom, take the technology, for example, area where you have a Stellenbosch, you have a Kigali, and perhaps another node in North Africa, you will start seeing the market sort itself out. And I believe that we need to also acknowledge where one of the neighboring countries has a comparative advantage. We needn't be spreading ourselves too thin and also trying to compete in that area. So no, we may not yet be that formidable bloc, but I believe that if business, government, and civil society throws its weight behind this initiative, it's only a matter of time that we'll be able to get there. We also have the advantage of lessons that may be learned from a bloc that has become as formidable as the European Union, but began to have fractures because one of the nations started feeling as though they were losing their sovereignty. So those are the lessons that will make our path, I think, much more sustainable.
All right, so this leads us quite well into the South Africa Investment Conference, which is taking place as well at the same time. So one has to keep an eye on that. And I just wonder, again, a lot of promises were made at the inaugural one. And I don't know, as business, have you been able to get a sense of promises and pledges made at the time? Have they come to pass, or are we still waiting on some of them to make their way?
So, Peter, I won't have the numbers on hand, but I believe that a fair share of the investment commitment has actually realized. But some of the companies that made investment commitments have actually stepped back and said the environment has changed so much that they need to review their commitments. I believe government has an opportunity, and we, as a development finance institution, if I may put my IDC hat on, have the opportunity over the next day or so to say to these companies, South Africa and the African continent remain very attractive. You have in this continent a very youthful, very large population that's aspirational, that is emerging, that's enterprising. And therefore, if your consumer or goods or services will have a thriving market. And I believe that products that are made in this continent as well will be attractive to other nations. So this is an opportunity for us to actually make a compelling case when we don't have tailwinds behind us, when it seems that there are headwinds. And I believe that South Africa can tell that story.
I think one of the issues that keeps coming up is that we have to create an environment that's easy for investment to come to our shores. And we have this conversation often. Do you think we're moving fast enough to get rid of any impediments that make it challenging for investors to say, you know what, maybe let's just wait and see, when they should be running towards us?
You know, unfortunately, we're not moving fast enough, but we are moving. And what's important is that we need to communicate the ground that has been covered. So the visa regulation, as an example, something that was quite topical at the investment conference last year has been in instances relaxed. However, we still haven't reached the level of having e-visas available across the board. We need to communicate what the impediments are and what timeframes we're working towards where we have been slow. But without a doubt, this movement, not fast enough. I would like to see us pick up our feet a bit.